There's a character in Genshin Impact that you should really care about, even if you don't like him. His name is Zandik. From the beginning, he never fit in this world. Records say he was born decades after the Cataclysm, and for reasons we still don't fully know, he was chased out of his hometown with pitchforks and clubs. Just another outcast in a world full of them. Except most outcasts in Genshin eventually find a place to belong. They learn to belong. They find a family. Zandik didn't. He didn't want to anyways. He made it into Sumeru academia, and during his studies, he became obsessed with Conrian technology. On one expedition, he was paired with a classmate named Sore. She wrote that he was rigid and that their research styles clashed so badly they barely had anything to talk about. But then, something shifted. They started discussing local plants and animals. She called it a great time. Her note ends with something kinda cute. They were gonna go on a picnic together later that night. A date, you might say. A date that would unfortunately be the beginning of a murder not-so-mystery. The Ragged Assistance record states that Zandik had acted without authorization for the third time. It also reports that Sore was gravely injured, supposedly mauled by Rishbalin tigers. By that point in time, Zandik had come to the conclusion that humans were nothing more than machines of a certain level of complexity. And if you're just a machine, then the obvious next step is modification. Enhanced humans. The academia started watching him more closely. His interest in Elazar was investigated. Records vanished. Then suddenly there was an Elazar outbreak. Investigators got suspicious, so they dug out Sore's remains. Despite the lacerations and hemorrhaging, the actual fatal injury was a fractured hyoid bone, which doesn't typically happen from tigers. It happens when someone strangles you to death. Zandik was expelled and he fled to the desert. And then Piero found him and offered exactly what a mind like that would never refuse: resources, freedom, and a purpose. Zandik accepted. He was given the title Il Dottore, the doctor, and he found the irony funny. And so, Zandik became the second of the Fatui Harbingers, and he would eventually become the man who would one day kill Sandrone. In today's video, we'll go over the lore and theories revealed in Acts 7 and 8 of the Luna 4 Archon Quests. We're going to make sense of Columbina's rise as the Trilune Moon Goddess, talk about that terrifying glitch at the end of the quest, the strange saving icon that appears mid-quest, whether Dottore and Sandrone are really dead, what happened to Rerir and Tholindis, and the one theory about the heavenly principles that genuinely destroys the way we've been interpreting Teyvat's lore this entire time. Today's video is sponsored by Cookie Run Kingdom, a city-building RPG set in Earthbread where you build your own kingdom, team up with cookie heroes, and battle your way to victory, and bring glory to your guild. Right now is the time to jump in because the 5th anniversary campaign kicks off with a major update featuring the newest Beast East World Series Chapter Episode 13, On the Border of Light and Darkness. The Cookie Alliance heads to the island where Dark Enchantress Cookie's research lab is hidden, only to get swarmed by desert monsters and experimental cookies powered by dragon magic. It's the ultimate clash of good versus evil. These are the banners running for the anniversary update: Dark Enchantress Cookie, Mold Dough Cookie, plus the Eternal Sugar Cookie costume and Shadow Milk Cookie costume. Dark Enchantress Cookie is a magic type from the new Witch rarity, and her prelude to the Apocalypse skill drops an abyss that freezes nearby enemies, slows them down, and drains their HP to form an indestructible shield. Also check out the 5th anniversary festival in Jelly Bear Village. Collect green apple coins and spend them in the festival special shop. Upgrade your special biscuits in the Festival Biscuit Forge and take the 5th anniversary special hot air balloon for exploration rewards like the 5th anniversary yeast ore to boost biscuit storage. There's even a festival premium gacha using cutter cards, doubling your chance for super epic or higher cookies and soul stones. Use the link in the description and pin comment down below to download Cookie Run Kingdom and celebrate the 5th anniversary. Your kingdom's waiting. Thank you so much Cookie Run Kingdom for sponsoring today's video. If you thought the scariest part of Luna 4 was Dottore, the glitch at the end, or even what the heavenly principles actually is, you aren't watching the screen closely enough, because it's actually the fact that Teyvat isn't flat. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but the game itself has been gaslighting us for years. Teyvat is constantly described as having a firmament. The Chaos Oculus talks about a civilization mighty enough to almost touch a dome of the firmament. Dragonspine's Peak of Vindagnir talks about celestial nails that come from the firmament. Firmament is a term from biblical cosmology, the dome separating the waters above from the waters below. So for a long time, a lot of us, including me, read that and went, okay, so Teyvat is running on a literal dome sky model. a flat earth model. And the in-game world supports that interpretation. There's even an NPC in the Sumeru Academia named Fargani, who treats the notion of a round Teyvat like it's some revolutionary, dangerous idea. If round is revolutionary, that means most Teyvatians think the world is flat. So when Acts 7 and 8 show us Teyvat is, surprise, a sphere, it immediately raises the question you're not supposed to ask out loud. If we were wrong about something that basic, what else have we been lied to about? And that's where the false sky comes in. If firmament shows up in Genshin's lore, it's referring to an actual physical barrier that wraps around the planet. Something the Heavenly Principles created to separate Teyvat from the rest of outer space. A protective shell because there's something wrong with outer space. But there's an alternative thought that's darker. Sure, a barrier around the planet can protect it, or worse, it can harvest it. Because we're dealing with Dottore and his insane experiments, my brain immediately jumps to the idea of a Dyson sphere, a hypothetical megastructure built to surround a star and capture most of its energy. It's basically a thought experiment for what a spacefaring civilization might do once a single planet can't meet its power needs anymore. So here's something for you to think about for now. If the false sky operates like a Dyson sphere, then Teyvat is being harvested. But who's collecting the power, and what are they using it for? But either way, this quest, among others before, make one thing painfully clear. The sky we see in-game is a fake sky. The moon we've been looking at this entire time is not the real moon. It's an image, a projection. And the real scale of this system is much bigger than we originally thought. The false sky isn't just beyond the clouds. It's a massive shell. At the end of Act 8, when Nicole, Varka, and Arlecchino pull the Frost Moon into range, they pull it into the false sky itself. Which means when the Traveler and Columbina are on the Frost Moon in the end, they're still inside the false sky. And I love that. I genuinely love that. The Frost Moon being brought within the false sky gave us one of the best cutscenes in the entire quest, with the Traveler and Columbina crossing into the moon together. But it also opens a door I don't know if we should have opened. If the moon in the sky was fake, is the sun fake too? If there are lunar authorities, does that mean there's a solar authority as well? Remember the chasm? The chasm was formed by something called the Sun Chariot falling down, and the people there had to help bring it back to the heavens. Records of Jueyun describes the solar chariot as a star with a proud and agitated temper. It slumbered after falling, then reawakened during the Archon War, and unable to stand the bloodshed, it leapt back into the sky. Again, just something to think about. But back to the Frost Moon. When the Frost Moon got pulled inside the false sky, part of me can't stop thinking, what did we just pull closer to Teyvat? What did we just potentially wake up? Because there's another thing that got pulled closer too, the Traveler's spaceship. But before we get into any of that, we need to talk about Columbina, because her rise to power as the Trilune Goddess can be hard to wrap your head around, so let's break it down first. Starting with her origin story. Columbina isn't really a biological birth in the traditional sense per se. It's more so treated like a phenomenon. She was said to have formed inside the sanctum of Oathbearer by the coalescing of primordial water and Kuvaki, and her existence was framed as the fulfillment of a long-held prophecy about a new moon goddess. She's derived from Canon, the original Frost Moon Goddess. And since the Frost Moon is the only moon left intact, the cleanest way to interpret this is that the Frost Moon's divine residue, Kuvaki, and primordial water condensed into a person, into Columbina. Her story after that is basically a loop of being loved, used, and then realizing the love was transactional. The Frost Moon Scions take her in and worship her as Kutar. She leaves. She joins the Fatui looking for a second home, and she spends ages being told your time to be useful hasn't come yet. Eventually, the Tsaritsa calls on her to fulfill a task, using up much of her divine power. And later, she leaves the Fatui too. With the Traveler's help and the power of friendship, Columbina finally claims an identity of her own in the name Columbina Hyposelenia. She finds a family, and for the first time, she isn't alone in the world. And then, in Luna 3, she escapes into the moon's reflection to stop Dottore from harnessing the power of the three moons. But what is the moon's reflection? The moon's reflection is a prison of warp space-time built by the Dragon King Nibelung, specifically designed to contain a moon goddess's divinity. And inside it, time moves backwards from the point Columbina enters. And it'll keep going, presumably all the way back to the moment the realm itself was created. The whole point is that it's built to be inescapable. Rerir and Tholindis couldn't leave. Their remnants are trapped there forever. So for Columbina to return, she has to fulfill certain conditions. She realizes time is reversed, and she uses Kuvaki to influence events in the past. In the Archon Archon Quests, there's a mysterious figure helping in the background, nudging people in exactly the right direction. Helping Flynn, the traveler in Paimon, find information on the Wild Hunt, protecting Hisi Island from the Kuvaki cannon blast, pulling the Death Tarot card for her during Moon Prayer Night. That was all Columbina. She basically left breadcrumbs for her friends and nod-krai to find so they can defeat Dottore and bring her back. But bring her back only works if she can rebuild herself in Teyvat. Columbina needs to rebuild herself by combining 3 components that the world recognizes as a real moon goddess: body, soul, and authority. For her body, Columbina realizes that she needs a way to be pulled back into reality, and the solution is the simplest possible way. She dies. She lets herself die inside the moon's reflection, so her moonlight spreads across nod-krai, starting from the distant past and across time. Her body itself becomes Kuvaki, the unique power only present in that region. For her soul, part of her soul stays behind in Teyvat as a Luonatar, basically a storage vessel holding her identity until she can be recovered. And because Luonatar was made from the fragment of Columbina's soul, Nefer can use it to peer into the distant past and see what Columbina was planning all along. And then there's authority. Authority is the part that makes the world accept her as a true moon goddess. Inside the moon's reflection, Columbina meets the imprisoned moon sisters and asks for their help. She needs their blessing to use their authorities to stop Dottore. They warn her that it could tear her apart, joining all 3 authorities in one body. But they agree, and transferring that power over to Columbina makes them mortal. Even then, Columbina's return isn't complete, because the missing core authority is physically on the Frost Moon, and her return isn't complete until the trilunar authority hidden there is brought into play. That's likely the will of the Frost Moon Skirk detected. So in a metaphorical sense, Columbina has the blueprint, but the system still isn't wired up yet. And that's where Sandrone's world formula comes in. In Fontaine's Netzes and Kreutz lore, René de Petrichor and Jacob Ingold calculated the world formula from Conria-related ruin data to predict the fate of the world, specifically a future catastrophe. They predicted that all the birthing waters of the world would dry up, then hundreds of years later, a flood during the Second Diluvian period would cover the earth and sky and leave the world in ruins. In Luna 4, Sandrone takes the same formula and uses it to find the fate of something else. So instead of using the formula to ask what would happen to the whole world someday, she instead asks the question, what conditions must be true for a specific outcome to occur? In this case, Columbina's return. So Sandrone repurposes the world formula into a rule calculation engine that can insert someone back into Teyvat, while also adhering to the rules in which Teyvat operates. And the traveler, a descender, becomes a required variable. By using Luonatar's connection to a variable in this world, an outsider who doesn't obey the same laws, they aim to retrieve Columbina's complete soul from inside the moon's reflection. Sandrone's formula handles about 90% of the work, which is establishing a connection to Columbina. The last 10% requires them to bring the Frost Moon down. That's the physical act that forces the recombination of Columbina's body, soul, and authority to actually happen. Body scattered as Kuvaki across nod-krai, soul stored in Luonatar, trilunar authority on the Frost Moon. Put them together, and Columbina successfully returns. Columbina is now the Trilune Goddess, carrying the full trilunar authority. She's the 4th moon, holding the power of the 3 who came before her. And now she's also the Welkin Moon, the real moon inside of Teyvat's false sky. So thanks, Sandrone. Your sacrifice was not in vain. But also, this is Sandrone we're talking about. If anyone could come up with backup plan after backup plan, it's her. But this brings us to one of the strangest parts of Columbina's story. Because if a future Columbina reached into the past through the moon's reflection to set all of this up, doesn't that make her existence a paradox? It does, but it's a specific kind. Columbina's situation is a bootstrap paradox, also known as a causal loop. Especially because of the song she sings. There's no clear first source. Her future self sings it, her past self remembers it, and she didn't learn it from anyone but herself. It's not the more popular grandfather paradox. Nothing suggests that she goes back to prevent her own birth, or creates a timeline where she both exists and doesn't. Her entire story is just a closed loop. But what happened to the 3 original moon goddesses? The 3 moons were ancient celestial bodies created by Dragon King Nibelung to rule primordial Teyvat. The Eternal Moon, the Iridescent Moon, and the Frost Moon. Each connected to a goddess, Arya, Sonnet, and Canon in that order. In the past, all 3 were granted authority over the laws of the world, but to avoid any one sister becoming too powerful, they mutually agreed to divide a portion of each domain's power among themselves. They used to have authority over life, death, time, space, and reason. They ruled while Nibelung was away exploring outer space. At this time, Teyvat was full of technologically advanced dragons. But then the heavenly principles arrived. the first descender. They were received as a guest by the three sisters. They coexisted in peace for a time until it became obvious the heavenly principles had other plans. A new world order and new rules imposed on the land. Arya and Canon found the new order intriguing, but Sonnet was against the intrusion from the start. But instead of resisting immediately, the sisters let it play out. They wanted to see whether it would be good or bad for Teyvat. But it turns out Sonnet was right. The heavenly principles instigated a war, overthrew the 7 dragon sovereigns, and placed all of Teyvat under its control. After that, the 3 moon goddesses entered a precarious peace treaty. The heavenly principles would tolerate them and allow their lunar cycles under the false sky, as long as their role in maintaining Teyvat didn't conflict with Celestia's designs. The dragons saw that peace treaty as betrayal from their moon goddesses. At some point, the sisters could no longer look away from Celestia's cruelty, and they started preparing countermeasures. But that's when Nibelung returned from his journey, now armed with the power of the Abyss, only to find his planet ruled by the heavenly principles. That sparked the second largest war in Teyvat's history, the Great War of Vengeance, a period also called the Funerary Year. Nibelung took the goddesses' hesitation as disloyalty, and the goddesses were imprisoned in the moon's reflection for the entire war. They were completely oblivious to what happened outside. Nibelung set about fashioning the actual moons into weapons of war against Celestia. It's implied the heavenly principles didn't know the moon goddesses were imprisoned at the time, but they responded anyway, and the response was catastrophic. The eternal moon and the iridescent moon were shattered. The frost moon was flung beyond the fall sky, and that destruction, combined with the banishment of the third, caused the moon goddesses to lose their reason for existence in Teyvat. The world rejected their presence and gradually sapped away their strength until they disappeared entirely. After the war, the heavenly principles did what it always seems to do. It hid the truth. It obfuscated the fate of the moons, hid both the shattered fragments and the lifeless corpse behind the false sky, and projected a fake moon over Teyvat's night sky. The sisters only learned what happened when Columbina traveled backwards through the moon's reflection and told them. And to make amends, all 3 agreed to abdicate their lunar authorities to Columbina Hyposelenia. This also explains why Sonnet, the goddess of the iridescent and crimson moons, recognized her. Columbina fulfilled their final request. As the Trilune goddess, she freed them from captivity and sent their now mortal bodies back to the frost moon. Once they lost their divinity, the prison stopped trying to keep them from escaping. But that also meant they would die soon after, because a moon goddess cannot survive without her moon. Arya and Sonnet were destined to die the moment they left the moon's reflection. And for Sonnet in particular, personally experiencing the shattered iridescent moon was excruciating. So in desperation, she fused her fading soul with the Abyss in a last-ditch attempt to prolong her lifespan, and it transformed her into the baleful crimson moon. Side note, but Sonnet's design reminded me of Freythyr from Luna 2. Freythyr is a descendant of the Crimson Moon dynasty. Rerir spared her life, and after that she met Tholindis for the last time. Before they parted, Tholindis gave a piece of the Crimson Moon to her. Unlike her sisters, Canon survived for a time after the war, but her separation from the exiled Frost Moon and the loneliness of living without her sisters drained her strength until she eventually died. But there's one more detail about the moon goddesses that keeps bothering me. They look human, even though humans technically didn't exist until after the heavenly principles created them. They're even depicted as humans in ancient murals. So maybe once humans became present in Teyvat, the moon goddesses chose to appear that way. Or maybe that's simply the form humans and humanoid beings perceive them. Or there's something worse. The Dragon King Nibelung ruled Teyvat, but he technically didn't create it. The heavenly principles also made the world anew and built the human realm, which we now call Teyvat, but that isn't the same as being the first creator of the planet in the absolute sense. So, what if dragons were not the first intelligent beings? What if they were just the first ones we identified? What if humans or humanoid beings existed before dragon supremacy? Then Teyvat's history really starts looking like a pattern of conquest, systems being replaced over and over again by the civilizations that keep conquering it. Speaking of someone who wants to conquer the world, how did Dottore become a false moon god? There are only 2 naturally existing moon marrows, the eternal moons and the iridescent moons. Moon marrows only form when a moon goddess dies. And since the only moon still intact is the frost moon, Columbina being born means she's naturally associated with it. Theoretically, there can't be a frost moon marrow until Columbina dies. So Dottore essentially had to make one, since he definitely wasn't gonna get it from Columbina. He made a synthetic marrow created inside his False Moon Institute in Nod-krai, designed to replace Columbina's role so he could become a moon goddess. It's implied he siphoned power from the eternal and iridescent marrows already in his possession. Those original marrows face constant rejection from Teyvat because they're part of the old world. But Dottore's artificial marrow was uniquely able to overcome that limitation, meaning he could use the Three Moons' power without restraint. In the final battle, Columbina became the sole Trilune Goddess by being willfully granted all 3 lunar authorities from her sisters. So when she descends alongside the Frost Moon, Dottore's substitute can't win. Desperate, he tries to reseal the Fall Sky to cut off the moon's ascent, but Arlecchina, Varka, and Nicole force the Frost Moon through the Fall Sky anyway. They overpower Dottore, and in the end, he's killed. But here's the problem. Was he actually killed? Because right at the very end of Act 8, the screen glitches as quest completed flashes, and if you look closely, there's a circuit-like pattern. That pattern is associated with Dottore. We've seen similar glitches in Sumeru, when he interfered with Scaramouche's past. So the implication is simple. Dottore is alive. But how? The answer could be his segments. Dottore created puppet-like copies of himself that preserve different versions of him across time. Nahida forced him to destroy his segments in exchange for the Electro-Gnosis. But do you seriously trust Dottore to be honest about that? And even if he did destroy the ones that already existed, he only promised to destroy them. That doesn't mean he can't make more after the fact. The Dottore we've been dealing with is likely the Omega segment, the one we met in Sumeru. And even if the Omega dies, that doesn't mean Dottore is fully gone. It just means one of his possibly many bodies died. The real Dottore could still be out there, somewhere. Probably some 400-year-old brain floating in a vat very, very far away. There's also a smaller detail that makes the ending feel even more suspicious. The ending screen flashes twice. You see True Moon quest completed while the Traveler and Columbina are on the moon. Then it happens again as Varka looks up at the moon. And throughout the quest, there's this detail that I noticed. There's a saving logo that appears. A pen writing on paper. That's not how Genshin loading screens have ever worked. Which brings us to a theory that changes how you interpret everything you just played. What if Acts 7 and 8 were an experiment? That's what the saving suggests, right? Not just that Dottore survived, but that he was recording something, saving the Traveler's answers and logging the results for a hypothesis. There are 3 key points where the saving shows up. When Dottore kidnaps the Traveler and traps them in his experiment energy field, after Wanderer rescues a Traveler from that field, and right before Dottore enters his boss form. If this is all an experiment, then each save is a checkpoint, a moment the results of what just happened get recorded. And he's always wanted the Traveler as a test subject because the Traveler is a descender, a being whose will can rival an entire world, a being who can transcend the laws of the world. So staying as close as possible to what the quest sets up, the most plausible reasons Dottore is testing the Traveler might be this. He wants to know whether an outside being can be controlled. If descenders transcend laws, can he still bind one to his rules anyway? The curse he placed on everyone that apparently triggers if you leave nod-krai is a perfect example of him trying to impose a condition on people. The Traveler would be the ultimate stress test. He wants to know whether the world formula can be changed by inserting a descender variable. Sandrone frames fate itself as calculable, then talks about variables and the Traveler being kidnapped specifically for being a descender. That implies the Traveler is a math-breaking input that Dottore wants. And finally, he wants to know whether the Traveler can be pushed into specific choices under artificial conditions. Their conversation is framed as Dottore probing, pressuring, and offering a shortcut to the Traveler's goal. Basically, a behavioral test. So what does saving actually mean? It could be Dottore just logging an experiment. Or it could be worse. It could be a hint that you're still inside an authored, recorded layer of reality, meaning that even after the battle, you're still inside Dottore's experiment. And yes, that second assumption is crazy. It would be wild if this turned into a Penacony situation where after the big finale, Black Swan just tells you, by the way, you died. This was all an illusion. And the experiments definitely don't stop there. There's a scene where Dottore's work involves people turning into animals. Or more specifically, their minds are inside animal bodies, while their human bodies lie dead right next to them. Albedo immediately identifies it as mind transfer. Dottore is transferring human minds into animal bodies, and the result is unstable. The victims may have lost their sense of self. So at minimum, Dottore is testing whether consciousness can be separated from a human body and placed into a different vessel, and how much of the self survives the transfer before collapsing. And if you want to feel your soul leave your body, consider what that implies when you remember what the Tsaritsa is doing. She's collecting Gnosis. The Gnosis were created from the body of the third descender. child might share the same name Ajax as a third descender, whose name might also be Satalainen. So the possibility that Dottore's experiments could be used to transfer the consciousness of a reformed third descender from the Gnosis into child's body as a vessel is pretty possible. Speaking of Fatui, we need to talk about Sandrone. Is she still alive? Could she come back? After you finish the quest, you can go back to your room on the flagship and read Sandrone's notebook. Most of it is funny and heartbreaking with little notes about Columbina, Alanguiotan, and La Senora. But the last line hints at the future in store for her, because I'm convinced her story isn't over. Iterated on my self-preservation mechanisms. That's Sandrone basically saying she upgraded her failsafes. She improved the systems that prevent her from being destroyed or shut down. In other words, she planned for survival, to come back if somehow she was killed. Sandrone's and Polonia's cores get taken back to the Fontaine Research Institute, the place founded by her creator Alain Guillotin. That kind of backup plan would be completely in character for Sandrone. Listen, I just want her to be playable, okay? And just like Sandrone, I've got a complaint. Because as much as I loved Acts 7 and 8, this is the exact reason I can't give them a perfect score. Nod-krai had the perfect setup for Istaroth to be involved. Her presence would explain so many of the time-related shenanigans so cleanly. The moon's authorities used to include power over life, death, time, space, and reason, but that isn't fully true anymore because the shades now have authority over those rules. The moons might still have some influence over them, but they don't control them completely. In the hymns of the far north, the frost moon scions pray to Istaroth to protect the 4 imprisoned moons. That could have meant the 3 moon sisters and Columbina literally trapped inside the moon's reflection. Imagine how insane it would have been if the gold pathway that leads Columbina through moments in time was actually Istaroth. And if after Columbina disperses her body into Kuvaki, we see a golden portal vanish, like how Asmodee listened in on the traveler and their siblings' conversation in A Space and Time for You. And Columbina's entire arc has been about finding her prologue, her origin story, while the Moon Sisters encourage her that her story isn't over. There's that famous Mondstadt saying, "Seeds of stories brought by the wind and cultivated by time." At one point, Istaroth and Barbados were worshipped simultaneously. And according to Venti, Istaroth began to write the story of the world. Like an ancient scroll, she engraved upon her memory all people, all events, all encounters, and all farewells. So it would make sense if the goddess of time, wind, memories, and stories was involved in the process of Columbina finding her prologue and continuing her story. Obviously, the Genshin writers are much smarter than me and have probably thought all of this through. Realistically, they probably already have something bigger planned. I'm just nitpicking and being an Istaroth stan. Now let me be potentially controversial for just a second. I want to know if you agree with me or not. But I didn't like the way Rerir and Tholindis' story ended. To be clear, I like what happened to them in the end, I just don't like how little attention it got. It felt like their conclusion was a shoo-in inside the Dottore arc, when their closure honestly deserved its own dedicated act. I don't mind that Rerir became more calm in the moon's reflection. I mind that we didn't get to see his progression. Earlier quests let us watch him devolve from a normal man into someone who committed genocide and clung to his position until he couldn't anymore. So for his final turn to happen off-screen feels like lost potential. Still, what we do get is meaningful. Rerir apologizes to Columbina, and for the first time, with the voices gone from his head, he feels both peace and horror at what he did. He tells her he's surprised he wasn't destroyed when he arrived again and reveals that Dottore was the one who revived him in the first place. He offers to help clear the obstacles in Columbina's path in exchange for one thing: send a message to Tholindis. Unlike Columbina, he can't move as freely in the moon's reflection. He's basically stuck in that same spot for all eternity. Columbina acts like a carrier dove, agreeing to deliver a message to Tholindis, mirroring how doves are often seen as messengers between worlds, like the dead sending peace to the living. Columbina tells him Dainsleif still considers him a friend and regrets not fully understanding what he went through. Rerir appreciates it and wishes her luck. Tholindis' side is tragic as well. She may have realized time moves backward in the moon's reflection. Her original goal was to stop King Irmin from becoming obsessed with the traveler's sibling 500 years ago, which is why she wanted to go to the past. But entering the moon's reflection as a mortal shredded her body instantly. Only her soul remained. She wondered if all her work was for nothing until Columbina finds her while looking for a way out and delivers Rerir's message. Tholindis learns the truth, forgives Rerir, recognizes her own mistakes, and thanks Columbina for bringing the news and letting her research matter. I don't mind that Rerir and Tholindis may never truly reunite for eternity. I just wish the execution gave their story the space it deserved. But here's one of Genshin's biggest unanswered mysteries. We still don't actually know who created Teyvat. We don't know who made the planet in the absolute sense. In-game text strongly claimed the Heavenly Principles made the world anew and built the human realm we call Teyvat after defeating the dragon sovereigns, while Nibelung ruled the old world with the Moon Sisters and the dragons. But neither the Heavenly Principles nor Nibelung seem to be the first to create the planet based on what was revealed so far. Which means there is still room for a truth we haven't even named yet. Speaking of the truth, there's one waiting on the Frost Moon. Traveler's spaceship is currently on the Frost Moon. It's the ship the twins boarded when they were traveling between worlds before arriving on Teyvat. It originally landed in Nod-krai, but has since been moved to the surface of the Frost Moon by the Heavenly Principles. Columbina tells the traveler she suspects the ship was intentionally hidden. Perhaps someone has certain truths they wish to hide from you, or from others. Most likely the Heavenly Principles. The traveler reads the flight logs and discovers something unsettling. The ship passed through Teyvat once, and continued until they were forced to crash land at nod-krai. And from what their sibling told them, they might not know either. Inside the ship, the traveler retrieves a new outfit, and reading the lore on it was one of the first things I did, because I needed to know what the game thought was important enough to tie to the traveler's identity. And I was not prepared for the question it raised. The AI that piloted the traveler and their sibling spaceship is the Heavenly Principles. The Heavenly Principles is an AI.